Hello everyone, this is ARIRANG News. I'm Laah Hyun-kyung in Seoul. The stories we're tracking for you at this hour. President Park Geun-hye, currently on a trip to the Middle East, talks to business leaders in Kuwait. She talks about the importance of boosting economic ties between the two countries. Now, Iraqi state television reports Iraqi forces are intensifying their efforts to retake the strategic stronghold of Tikrit from Islamic State militants. Some 30,000 fighters are said to be involved in the operation. And China is set to start its biggest political gathering of the year this Tuesday. Many are watching to see if Beijing will increase its defense budget again this year. Now, first, we begin with President Park's trip to the Middle East. Before leaving for Saudi Arabia, she met with Korean and local business communities in Kuwait and emphasized the importance of bolstering ties on the economic front. ARIRANG's presidential office correspondent Choi Yoo-sun reports.
President Park Geun-hye continued to pitch Korean businesses in Kuwait, this time to the country's business community. At Monday's bilateral business forum, she highlighted a synergy effect that can be achieved from Korea and Kuwait joining their innovation and industrial diversification growth initiatives.
이제 이러한 양국의 경제 혁신 방향에 맞추어 경제 협력도 새로운 발걸음을 내디뎌야 합니다.
Referring to Kuwait's distribution infrastructure project, President Park said Korean companies are more than ready to participate, citing their 40-year experience in Kuwaiti infrastructure building. She also talked about visiting a site earlier where Korean companies are currently building a 48-kilometer-long bridge across the Bay of Kuwait. The Korean president then emphasized a need for Korea and Kuwait to upgrade their cooperation in energy from the current oil trade to joint ventures in oil exploration, development and production, as well as non-traditional energy sources like shale gas. More than 100 Korean and Kuwaiti SMEs held one-on-one business sessions where a dozen deals worth $135 million are near to being signed.
It's a shopping mall that has a 2-kilometer roof, and Korea's District Holdings has concluded a deal to build a children's cafe there worth some $100,000.
President Park now travels to Saudi Arabia, the second leg of her Middle East tour. Meeting with the leaders of Korea's top oil-supplying nation, she plans to use diplomacy to expand cooperation into the fields of nuclear energy, healthcare, and ICT. Choi Yoo-sun, ARIRANG News, Kuwait City.
A Toronto-based church says it has lost contact with its Korean-Canadian pastor for more than a month now. The pastor was in North Korea for a humanitarian mission, and this is raising fears that he might be held captive by the communist regime. For more on this story, here's ARIRANG's Hwang Sung-hee.
It wasn't his first visit to North Korea. Korean-Canadian pastor Reverend Im Hyun-soo had made numerous trips to oversee a nursing home, a nursery, and an orphanage in North Korea's northeastern city of Rajin. That's why his Toronto-based Light Korean Presbyterian Church wasn't initially worried when they lost contact with him. After last hearing from Im on January 31st, the church expected him to be out of contact until February 4th. When Im didn't contact them, members of the church waited another 21 days to allow for a possible Ebola quarantine. North Korea's anti-Ebola measures require foreign visitors to be placed under quarantine for 3 weeks. Im had been involved in a variety of missionary projects in North Korea for more than 20 years. The Canadian government says consular officials are in contact with Im's family, but declined to comment on Im's situation. North Korea takes a hard line against religion of any sort, seeing it as a threat to the ruling Kim dynasty. While a UN report estimates up to 400,000 of North Korea's 24 million population are Christians, that number is impossible to verify because none of them can freely practice their religion. In 2007, a Korean-Canadian pastor was detained by North Korean authorities for worshipping in public. Hwang Sung-hee, ARIRANG News.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry has slammed North Korea in the meantime for its human rights abuses, saying tens of thousands of people are living as virtual slaves. In his keynote speech at the 28th UN Human Rights Council in Geneva on Monday, Kerry said there is no freedom of expression in the North since Kim Jong-un executes anyone who disagrees with him. He added that for decades, the North Korean government has subjugated its citizens through starvation and torture, causing hundreds of thousands of people to lose their lives. Kerry said the report published by the Commission of Inquiry on North Korea's human rights record last year led to a clear condemnation of what is happening inside that country. Now, following a huge backlash in South Korea, Washington has stressed that the controversial comments made by a top U.S. official, Wendy Sherman, on East Asian affairs were in no way targeting any specific country. But watchers in Seoul say it's still not enough to calm the waters. ARIRANG's Connie Kim has more.
Washington has moved to clarify recent controversial comments made by a senior U.S. official and said its stance on historical tensions in Northeast Asia remains the same. This comes after U.S. Undersecretary of State Wendy Sherman on Friday urged leaders in Asia to refrain from stirring up nationalist feelings. Seoul's foreign ministry had responded quickly, saying it would not take her comments lightly. Sherman's remarks were seen as being directed at South Korea and China, which are critical of Japan for denying its wartime atrocities, such as sexual enslavement of women. And looking to defuse the controversy, the U.S. State Department said Sherman's comments were not directed at a particular leader in the region. It added that South Korea and Japan are Washington's most important U.S. allies in East Asia, and that it's important that Seoul and Tokyo maintain constructive relations for peace and prosperity in the region.
Obviously, our three countries share a lot in common, and in no way was she speaking about any one person or any one country.
Harf did not elaborate, but the State Department told Seoul-based Yonhap News Agency that historical issues should be dealt with in a manner that promotes healing and reconciliation. It emphasized that Japan's past statements apologizing to the victims of its wartime aggression marked an important chapter in Japan improving relations with its neighbors. However, there are voices of concern that the U.S. doesn't want to involve itself in Northeast Asia history because it wants to maintain its relationship with Japan. Experts say Washington is seeking to strengthen its relationship with Japan and Korea to counter China's growing military presence in East Asia. Connie Kim, ARIRANG News.
Well, China's top political advisors will gather this evening to kickstart the country's biggest annual political meeting. The first of the two big sessions, the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, will cover many topics, but the one garnering lots of attention is the country's military spending plans. ARIRANG's Kwon So-ah has more.
Military spending is sure to be one of the hot topics on the table at this year's two major political meetings in Beijing. Chinese President Xi Jinping's vision for a strong China includes building a stronger army.
National defense modernization is the key to modern warfare. It's like the nerves inside the body.
China's military spending had been on the decline until 2013, but increased by 12% last year to more than $130 billion, putting China behind top military spender, the United States. China's defense budget is expected to increase again this year, especially given the country's involvement in a territorial dispute with Japan over an island chain in the East China Sea, and Tokyo's announcement earlier this year of its biggest defense budget ever.
An expansion of military power according to a nation's economic growth is inevitable. The same goes for China.
There is global interest in the upcoming announcement as many countries try to narrow the gap in military spending with China. China's 2015 defense budget is expected to be unveiled on the opening day of the National People's Congress on Thursday. Kwon So-ah, ARIRANG News.
A major offensive is underway in Iraq to take back the strategic city of Tikrit from Islamic State militants. It's a massive operation with the joint forces numbering the tens of thousands, and victory is crucial for future plans to retake Mosul, Iraq's second-largest city, also under IS control. Son Jung-in has the story.
The thunderous sounds of artillery and warplanes were heard outside Tikrit as Iraqi forces attacked Islamic State strongholds in the northern province of Salahuddin.
We prepared these weapons to dislodge the extremists from Tikrit.
The Iraqi Prime Minister ordered forces to regain the territory and to avoid killing civilians.
Our goal is to release the ordinary people from oppression and terror threats from IS. We must protect the lives of civilians and the property in the city.
The massive operation to retake Tikrit from the IS group is reportedly made up of some 30,000 soldiers. The Saddam Hussein's hometown fell into the hands of the extremist group last summer. The Iraqi military commander of the Salahuddin region, Abdul Wahab Asadi, told state television that the operation was going as planned. Latest reports say Iraqi forces have seized at least 2 districts near Tikrit. The number of casualties is still being verified. Unlike other anti-IS operations in Iraq and Syria, the United States is taking a back seat this time, as Iraq did not ask for any support or U.S. involvement. Instead, Iran's military is playing a significant role in helping Iraq drive the Islamic State militants from Tikrit. Capturing the town is viewed as crucial in any future plans to retake Mosul, Iraq's second-largest city, also under IS control. U.S. military officials have said that mission could be launched as early as April. 손정인, ARIRANG News.
Now, as we said earlier, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is in Geneva. The UN Human Rights Council is not the only thing on his agenda by far. He is also talking with his Iranian counterpart to hammer out a framework for a nuclear deal ahead of a deadline later this month. On the other side of the globe, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is in Washington preparing to make his case before the U.S. Congress squarely against that nuclear deal. Now, the Israeli leader addressed a pro-Israel lobbying group on Monday where he said he had a, quote, moral obligation to speak up against a nuclear Iran that would pose a threat to his country's survival. He also underlined that his speech was not meant to disrespect the U.S. President Barack Obama in any way. In the year 2012, where Korea was at its record high.
All of the day's important events close to home and around the world. Join Laah Hyun-kyung live from Seoul.
Shopping market thinks the true meaning of creation shines through. After years of political wrangling, a comprehensive anti-corruption bill is set to pass the National Assembly this afternoon. Once signed into law, people with some kind of public influence, for example, government officials, lawmakers, reporters, and the faculty of public and private schools could be hit with up to 3 years in prison if they take money or valuables worth more than 1 million won, roughly $900 from one person in one go. The spouses of public officials will also be subject to the new law, but not their immediate or extended family members. The parties also decided to allow a 1.5-year grace period for enforcement of the law from the date of its passage, as proposed by the government. Consumer prices in Korea last month grew at the slowest pace in nearly 16 years. Data released by Statistics Korea shows that prices went up by a mere 0.5% from a year earlier in February, growing in the 0% range for the third month in a row. Officials attributed the low growth to the recent drop in global oil prices, which has dragged down the domestic oil prices by over 5% during this period. Now, some analysts have voiced concerns about the possibility of deflation, while others have ruled it out, citing the fact that core inflation, which excludes petroleum products, grew by 2.3% from a year ago. The amount of money Koreans spend overseas set a new record last year. Experts say this is partially due to a surge in overseas travel despite the sluggish economic recovery. ARIRANG's Shin Se-min tells us more.
Koreans' overseas credit card spending set a record-breaking high of $12.2 billion last year. Data released by the Bank of Korea Tuesday shows that the figure jumped 16% from 2013. The central bank cited an increase in direct purchases from websites overseas, tuitions for students studying abroad, and a jump in overseas travel. Korean spending on overseas travel had been rising since last July when it first hit a record of $1.8 billion. Their overseas expenditures reached an all-time high of over $1.9 billion this January, up 17% from the same period last year. The central bank said that over 1.8 million Koreans traveled outside Korea in January as a weak Japanese yen and low oil prices facilitated overseas trips. Experts say the low oil prices drove down airline ticket prices, giving travelers a wider selection of low-cost carriers. Experts also expressed concerns about Koreans' reluctance to spend money at home while their spending outside of Korea continues to rise. To address the problem of a sluggish domestic economy, they urge measures to attract more foreigners to boost the domestic economy. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
Now, feeling angry from time to time is perfectly normal, but flying into an uncontrollable rage could be a sign of bigger underlying issues. Young men are said to be more prone to these feelings, but there are a number of ways to channel this energy in a more positive way. For this story, here's ARIRANG's Kim Min-ji.
A man recently drove his car into his girlfriend for breaking up with him. And another became violent in the middle of a highway tunnel after another driver did not give way to him. These are just a couple of cases that show individuals failing to control their anger. The intense rush of uncontrollable rage is normally linked to some kind of personality or behavioral disorder. A recent study revealed that out of 13,000 people who were treated for such disorders last year, 2/3 were under 30 years old. What's especially interesting is that although the overall number of patients hasn't changed much in recent years, the proportion of men in their 20s jumped 13% over the past 5 years.
This might be due to young patients feeling they were not rewarded enough for their efforts during their teens, and the anger and frustration builds up. They can feel no regrets about their bursts of anger as they feel they have the right to be angry.
Personality or behavioral disorders are not only characterized by angry outbursts. People with interpersonal problems and those who refuse to believe they have done anything wrong in certain situations may also have a disorder. Doctors say that finding a healthy and undisruptive way to release built-up anger and stress is key to alleviating such disorders. Taking the anger out on other people actually increases the frustration and can sometimes lead to bigger, even legal problems. Experts say the best approach is to focus on relatively strenuous activities like hiking or running, or having a hobby to focus on. Kim Min-ji, ARIRANG News.
A discovery of rare photographs taken in Korea during the late 19th and early 20th century has revealed never-before-seen images of key figures in Korea's history. Our Im Yoon-hee joins us today with more on this interesting story. Good afternoon, Yoon-hee.
Good afternoon. Right. So late last year, a huge collection of these photographs taken of modern Korea were discovered at Rutgers University in New Jersey, more specifically at the William Elliott Griffith Collection. Now, of the 592 photographs discovered, hundreds of these photographs have never been seen before by the public. Take a look at some of them.
The fifth son of Korea's Emperor Gwangmu, Prince Yi-gang, lived during a tumultuous time in Korean history, during the First Sino-Japanese War. This recently discovered shot is one of the earliest pictures of the prince, taken in 1899 when he left to study abroad in the United States. Another photograph is of Hungsun Daewon-gun, known to some Westerners as Prince Kung. He served as regent of the Joseon dynasty while King Gojong was a minor during the 1860s. The picture on the right, believed to be him in his 40s, shows a much younger version of him. Seo Jae-pil, also known as Philip Jason, was a leader in Korea's fight for independence, even putting together the doomed Kapsin coup to oust the Joseon-era leadership. He was the first Korean to receive U.S. citizenship, and this new picture on the left shows a young 23-year-old Seo, taken in 1887. Another leader of the failed Kapshin coup was Park Geun-hye, this rare image of the Korean politician at 25 before his involvement with the Enlightened movement of Korea. And lastly, Kim Ok-yoon, a reformist during the late Joseon dynasty. The image on the left shows him at 35 years old, and though there are many black and white photos of him, this is the first known color photograph of Kim. And while these pictures reveal a small piece of Korea's history, musician Hwang Byung-gi holds on to history in his own way. For decades, he's been a master of the popular kayagum, one of Korea's most played traditional Korean instruments. And now, a new book about Hwang, compiled by English scholar Andrew Killick over 25 years, has recently been published in Korean.
So the book, of course, was originally written in English, but now there's a published version, Korean version published recently.
Right. So Hwang Byung-gi is a very important, not only composer, but a musician as well. Now this book was, like she said, first published in English, but because of its importance, it was translated into Korean and republished recently. Now for those who are not familiar, the kayagum, which is a 12-string zither instrument, the more traditional Korean instrument played here, one of the more popular instruments. Now that's one of the instruments he's seen playing. But the history of the instrument dates back to the 6th century, and it's very important for us here in Korea and for the culture as well. So a very important musician.
Right. So there are many ways to remember the history, and of course, photographs. Those were very interesting as well.
Right. So of the tons and tons of photos, hundreds of photos that were found, there were also photographs found of Empress Myeongseong, also known as Queen Min. Now, many people don't know, but she was originally buried at a separate location and later moved, but pictures of this original location, her original burial, were also discovered, and these images had never been seen before, so that was a very big find. People were very excited about that.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Hyun-hye, for bringing us this story today.
You're very welcome.
Hello, I'm Michelle Park here with the latest weather forecast. It was snowing and raining here in Korea this morning, but both have paused at the moment, and meanwhile there is a light layer of fog across the nation along with these clouds. Now, morning precipitation has cleared most of the flying dust away and the levels are back to normal. However, there will be sudden increases throughout the day, so stay updated if you're planning on going outside. Today is also going to be pretty gray due to the low pressure front in the atmosphere. Along with the gloomy skies, the precipitation is expected to continue throughout the day and into the evening. Now, snow is mostly expected in the upper parts of the peninsula, such as in Gangwon-do province, while the rest of the country below the central region will see up to 5 millimeters of rain. Now, checking out the readings for today, Seoul will peak up to 5 this afternoon, while Gwangju and Busan will both get up to 8 degrees. And moving over to other regions, Jeju Island gets up to 10, Dokdo hits down to 7, while Mangkang is chillier at -3 degrees. That's all for now, Michelle Park, and here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
And that's a wrap from us at this hour. I'm Laah Hyun-kyung in Seoul. Thanks for watching. We'll be back with more updates at 4 p.m. Korea time.